Hello everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Comics. So as you recall, Richard had a video last week where he counted down his top 10 heroes in all of comic books. So that's a question I've asked myself many times before. Who are my top 10 favorite superheroes? And it's a question that I still struggle with, and I don't think I'd be able to put a list together like that he did, because I love too many of them too equally. I just don't think I'd be able to do it. So what I decided to do is a list of my top 10 villains. Now, I love villains just as much, if not more. I do think that I like the villains more, but I do have a better picture of which villains I like the most, as opposed to heroes where it's just too close to really tell. But yeah, villains are awesome. Comic book villains are just some of the most interesting characters out there, and so I thought it'd be fun to give you my take on this. This is not a top 10 villain list in terms of strength or anything, it's just who I find the most interesting, cool, and just best characters. And so without further ado, here are my top 10 villains in comic books. Number 10 is the Lizard. Let me clarify, I am not talking about the Lizard in the Amazing Spider-Man movie. The Lizard in the Amazing Spider-Man movie ruined the Amazing Spider-Man movie for me. I thought that he was just absolutely ridiculous. I thought that Rhys Ifans, however you pronounce it, was really good as Curt Connors. And he tricked me into thinking that he was going to be a good character throughout the rest of the movie. But then as soon as he turned to the Lizard... As soon as he turned to the Lizard and had that stupid little grin on his face the entire movie, and was all of a sudden talking in his head like Norman Osborn did in the first Spider-Man, and then seemed to have no real clear motives and was seemingly just a different being altogether than Curt Connors and had no consciousness of being Curt Connors ever, even though it's never explained in the movie, it wasn't good. The Lizard in the comic books is awesome. I mean, just look at this picture. Look, this is what the movie version should have been. He's just he's a badass in the comic books. He's really cool and really gritty and really dark and one of Spidey's best foes. And I think that his relationship with Peter is one of the most interesting relationships between a hero and a villain, because Curt Connors did used to be Peter's high school teacher. And so that dynamic is always very interesting to me. And so yeah, the Lizard in the comic books is my number 10 top favorite villain. Alright, number 9 is an interesting choice, because this is a character who actually appeared in Richard's top 10 heroes, and that is Sinestro. Sinestro, it's hard to classify Sinestro. He can be seen as a hero, he can be seen as a villain, he can be seen as both. He can be seen as an anti-hero, he can be seen as misunderstood. I like to think of him as both a hero and a villain. I think that he makes for a better villain, though. When he was in the Yellow Lanterns and he was fighting against Hal Jordan, I thought that that was a really, really interesting storyline, and to see his dark side come out was awesome. The relationship between him and Hal is one of the best relationships in comics, and while he is a really awesome hero, I think he's an even better villain. So yeah, Sinestro is number 9. Number 8 is none other than the Red Skull. For no other reason than the fact that he, more than any other villain on this list, just terrifies me. He scares me. I mean, he's like a freaking Nazi. He's definitely, well, I mean, he wears a red, he has a red skull, so obviously he's not that realistic, but yet he's somehow one of the more believable, recognizable villains in all of comics. And while he may not be the strongest physically, he has Hydra at his command. He has an entire army, and he's definitely one of the smarter villains too. And so, yeah, so Red Skull's my number 8 just because he's scary. Number 7 is Lex Luthor. Lex Luthor is seen as one of the quintessential comic book villains. Some of you might be wondering why he's not higher up on my list, or lower down technically, but I think he's just seen as one of the iconic villains, and so people think that he's one of the best, but to me he's just a really good villain. I think he deserves the number 7 spot, because he's just, oh man, he's an evil guy, and he's definitely one of the more interesting characters in all of DC, not just villains, but in all of DC, because he is relatable, and I mean, he's a human. He's not like these other supernatural, fantastical villains. He's a human who is definitely relatable to, in many aspects, to all of us, I think, and he's not a nice guy, and he has some pretty evil tactics, but the fact that he's more similar to us than most other villains is what is so scary about him. And yeah, shoot me, but I will defend Superman Returns till the day I die, and I thought that Kevin Spacey was a wonderful Lex Luthor, and so yeah, it was nice to see him represented well on film, in my opinion. So anyway, number 7, Lex Luthor. Number 6 is a character we've become familiar with recently, named Thanos. Thanos is the big space badass of the Marvel Universe. Thanos is motivated by love of the physical embodiment of death, and that's a very interesting motivation for a villain. Usually it's just power or money, but to see such an evil, ruthless character who's basing all of his actions on love is really interesting. Infinity Gauntlet is one of my favorite stories in all of Marvel. I am so glad that he was included in the little snippet at the end of the Avengers. Spoiler warnings if you have not seen that movie yet. And I cannot wait to see him when he reappears whenever, probably in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, and then in an Avengers sequel, whether 2 or 3, we have yet to see. So yeah, Thanos is just an awesome character. He's one of the best cosmic characters in the Marvel Universe, certainly, and yeah, he's cool. Number 5 is Norman Osborn. Now, as you know, Norman Osborn was the Green Goblin for a while, and while the Green Goblin is an awesome character, don't get me wrong, I'm talking about Norman Osborn specifically on this list, because Norman Osborn, the person behind the Green Goblin, is even scarier in ways. The fact that he was able to rise to power and manipulate the masses and enact all the terrible things he did in events such as Siege and Dark Avengers was crazy. I mean, he became one of the big bad guys of the entire Marvel Universe, and not just Spidey. But he definitely is also Spidey's best villain. I do believe that, and I think that he is just a really cool character. And I did like Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin in the original Spider-Man movie. I love that movie. But I would also really like to see in an Amazing Spider-Man sequel this Norman Osborn, the more behind-the-scenes, manipulative, puppet master Norman Osborn. I think that that'd be a really interesting take on him on film, and I hope to see it. Alright, so number 4 is a character we also have become very well informed of recently in Thor and the Avengers, Mr. Loki. Loki, he's just so misunderstood. Loki is one of the most sympathetic villains of all of comics. He does love his brother. I think he does love his father to an extent, or at least he did. But his upbringing and his entire life being lived in the shadow of his older brother is what makes him do these mischievous, evil things, and it makes you feel for him. He's done horrible things. I mean, in the Avengers movie, he tried to take over Earth, but you still feel bad for him, and you still want him to succeed, or not necessarily succeed in his villainous endeavors, but just find some sort of peace or something, you know. In the comics, he is currently a child. He was Loki, then he was woman Loki, now he's child Loki. I just like regular Loki, but if you want to check out Journey into Mystery, which is the series he's starring in now, it's interesting, and he's a little kid, and it's an interesting take on it. But yeah, I just love Loki, and I feel for the guy. Alright. Number 3 is an awesome character. Get ready. Galactus.
So speaks Galactus. Galactus
is by far the most powerful villain on this list. He eats worlds, for heaven's sake. Yeah, there's very little to do when Galactus is coming your way. I mean, this is a guy who you can't just go beat up the same way you can the rest of the people on this list. So he is one of my favorites just because of his sheer strength and badassness, and the fact that he devours worlds at his whim, and these heroes that we come to know and love and root for and think can do the impossible really stand no chance against this guy. And so it's all a matter of finding incredible ways to stop him or just talking him out of it or giving him other worlds to eat instead. I think Galactus needs a better film treatment than he got in Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, where he was a cloud. We need a better Galactus, and if Marvel eventually gets the rights back to the Fantastic Four characters, we might be able to see him, might even be able to see him in the MCU, which would be awesome. So yeah, Galactus is number 3. Number 2 is my favorite villain in all of Marvel, and it is Doctor Doom, Victor Von Doom. Doctor Doom, to me, is the villain of the Marvel Universe. Every hero has their villain. Spidey has a whole array of them. Green Goblin, Lizard, Iron Man has the Mandarin, Hulk has the Leader, Captain America has Red Skull, Wolverine and the X-Men have Magneto. But Doctor Doom is everyone's villain. He's started out and is still technically the main villain of the Fantastic Four, but everyone has dealt with Doctor Doom a lot, and everyone has to put up with his evil ways because he really is the smartest villain and the most dangerous villain. He's scary, and he is awesome. He's one of the coolest looking, he has one of the coolest outfits, I think, in all of comics, and more than anyone that I've said so far, he needs a good film treatment because my God, in the Fantastic Four movies, he was awful. I mean, that was just, I don't know what that was, but I will never be able to get that out of my head, that awful performance. It was just ridiculous. And so, Doctor Doom, you can't beat Doctor Doom in the Marvel Universe. He's always 2 steps ahead of everybody else. No one ever really knows exactly what he's up to, but yeah, he's a guy you don't want to mess with. And my number 1 villain, it probably will not surprise you, Rhino. No, I'm just kidding. Number 1 villain is Joker. And I think that's most people's number 1 villain because the Joker is the villain in comics. He is the go-to villain when people think of comic books and superheroes, and there's a reason for that. He's a human being who is just as insane as the rest of these superheroes, but he's just using that insanity towards villainous ends, and he is just terribly fascinating. Investigating his psyche in these comic book stories, and we've gotten so many great stories over the years, like The Killing Joke especially is my favorite, that really investigate who this person is, and he's, in my opinion, the greatest comic book creation of all time. The Joker is, I think the Joker is my favorite character of anything, my favorite fictional character. He's amazing. It goes without saying that Heath Ledger played him perfectly and that no one else will be able to top that ever. I mean, all you can do is do a different version of him in a future movie, but it's just not going to beat it. You just have to try to be different. He's the best villain there is, and there's really just no arguing that. It's not even my opinion, it's a fact, so if you disagree, you're wrong. Alright, well anyway, now that I've successfully gone over the time limit I was hoping for, I'm sorry I kind of get carried away, I hope you enjoyed this list, but please, 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 disagree with me. Tell me in the comments what I am crazy about, what I am right about, and who should have been on the list, and who your top villains are. Alright, so we will be back with a brand new episode of comics on Sunday, as usual, where we will be giving you some awesome Marvel and DC news. A couple things to do before you go. Please subscribe and like this video if you want to. On Facebook, I have joined a page that is devoted to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It is the top page for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It has 16,000 fans and counting, and so it's just a really fun page where you can get up-to-date news on everything about the MCU, but also just discuss it and answer fun questions, and really just join a community of people who also love this great franchise and discuss it with people. So please go like it on Facebook if you wish to. Marvel Cinematic Universe is the name of the page, and yeah, we'd really appreciate it. Alright, well, thank you for watching everybody, and we'll see you this Sunday with a brand new episode of comics.